I'm usually not used to hitting record. Okay, so here we are. So now this will be re-uploaded to YouTube, I do believe. So, but I have no idea how we're doing this today. Some people asked if we were doing non-metallic metal. Some people asked if we were doing, true metallic metal, anything like that. So for everyone that is in the chat right now, just let me know what you want, and we'll figure it out. I didn't really have a good selection in terms of like something that we could feature. Like I always like to feature one aspect of a miniature, and I just couldn't pick what I wanted, and so I wanted one of these guys, and that's where we're at. So let me know in the chat what you would like to see. If you're someone that wants to learn a little bit more about painting with metallic paint, or if you want some cool tonal work, stuff like that with non-metallic metal, drop it in the chat right now, and we will get started. So. But yeah, I'm excited. I know there are plenty of you in the chat, so if it suddenly goes quiet and you make me make this decision, you're getting a completely matte black miniature. We're going to spend 2 hours putting noir black all over it, and that's what you're going to get. So definitely let me know what sounds interesting. Hey everybody. Some neat tricks on giving TMM a stylish look. Well, I definitely can handle that. For sure. I was doing a little bit of that yesterday, actually. But I think the potato has it, if that's the case. So what we'll do, we'll just go ahead and get started without really having to make any decisions, which is great. So a little bit of paint info. I use Reaper paints, and I use a limited palette of 32. I say it's 32 colors. It started off as 32 colors. It's kind of like between 32 and 36. And that's it. Essentially, it's all the primary colors plus 3 metallics and like 2 tones of each primary. I used to be somebody that was a big believer of, like, hey, I want 1 billion paints, and that's what, we're doing with that. And I worked with Reaper for nearly 2 years. I don't know if you ever saw the kits. Oh, they're actually behind me up on my display cases up there. But I've developed the Miniature Monday kits with them, and where it was a box of miniatures and paints, and then we did videos with them as well. But we always shipped out a bunch of paints, and so I got really used to using the Reaper MSP line, and now I'm just kind of trained to it. But I used to be a fan of having an insane amount of paints, and now I like having a controlled palette because I feel like it, helps you make more predictable results when you're painting, and it makes you faster. Brush-wise, it doesn't necessarily matter, obviously, what paints you use. I actually just started using these Da Vinci Miniature Maestros. Size 2 is the size smallest, but it's actually the same as like a size 1. Whatever, every company has different sizing. But previous to switching over to this release, I used the Da Vinci Maestro Series 10 size 1, both of which are really phenomenal brushes. I highly recommend trying them out if you haven't, if you are someone that wants to kind of try a better brush. Otherwise, if you are someone that doesn't necessarily want to spend money on a fancy brush, I actually don't have one here in front of me anymore. Oh, maybe I do? This is going to be empty, isn't it? It's empty. But, so I buy bulk brushes too off of Amazon. I think they're called like One Happy Choice. Those work really well. I always suggest them because you get like 12 hours of painting, and you get really, really fine brush tip control on those. If you are looking for cheap brushes, check them out. You get like 50 for 20 bucks, if I'm not mistaken. But, so I know those questions always pop up. People are like, what paint are you using? I do use a wet palette. It's not branded at all. I don't think you need to buy a branded one. It's cool if you buy a branded one, but I just literally use a sponge cloth and a sheet of parchment paper. So fancy, I know. But as we make our decision on everything else, I'm going to start off with a dark red here on top of the zenithal. For whatever reason, I think red, maybe, yeah, so we'll do, I just immediately changed my mind. So it depends on if we're doing gold or if we're doing silver. We're gonna do gold. All right, we're gonna do gold. I know that obviously the February release are like the demons, so that would be kind of, for whatever reason in my head, I'm like, maybe I shouldn't do a red, but who cares? So I'm doing a 1-to-1 ratio of water and paint as I slap down our base coat. Now, you don't have to use a zenithal base coat or priming whenever you're painting. All of the painting I did last month as part of my Patreon, we didn't do it at all. So, you know, it's not something that like I swear by any means. But I do think it is something that helps you go a lot faster. And obviously even surface tension on your paint and on the brush and everything is a really big part of making that happen. Zenithal, of course, if you are unaware, refers to the word zenith, right? So like the point at which a light source, really it refers to the sun, but it's kind of like lighting from above, and so that's why the painters refer to it as a zenithal highlight. And so I use an airbrush. I use a Iwata Eclipse. I've owned a bunch of different ones, but the Iwata I literally can like abuse and neglect and break it down and put a bunch of acetone in it, clean it out, and it just continues to deliver results, as opposed to others I've used. I mean, I've used Badger brushes, I've used Reaper, like the Reaper, well, I guess that's a Badger brush. I've used a Harder and Steinbeck, whatever pronunciation that is, so I've tried a lot of them, but I'm just happy with my Iwata. And then I use Badger Primer on top of that, but I know that, like I used to use Vallejo as well. Both are totally fine. But if you don't do a zenithal, it's not a big deal. It just helps me go a little bit faster. Fun fact for you that you don't really hear much either is nadiral application of color, which is the opposite of zenithal, which would be from below. I don't know if I have any examples of from below. Yeah, I do. So like this guy has purple from below. So that would be like the opposite. And you typically, whenever you're painting, you would do that application at the end of a paint job, so you can see the tinted purple that comes through. All of that was done with an airbrush. This, I don't remember. I think this guy was just a Miniature Monday like stream I did for fun. But, so that's kind of the opposite, right? But just so you know terminology, I know there's so many fun words in painting that like are made up and don't necessarily mean anything to anyone other than miniature painters, but... And of course, if you have any questions, anything like that, scream them in the chat, all caps, and I will try and help you out. Assuming I myself know the answer. Now then, let's be a little bit lazy here, just because we're going to be spending a lot of time on the armor and such. So, while I would love to paint this additional tassel in a secondary color, where we are sort of planning our paint job here for success. So we'll just have all of the cloth be the same. We will work our way up from there. Now then, I believe I don't know the term here, but the squirt, the little skirt we got going on, the little tassels, these are going to be leather. So I'm going to grab, I'm going to grab a basic brown. This is intense brown for those with similar colors at home, but it's just a very run-of-the-mill brown color. This is going to be the same amount of water to paint, so we're just going to do a 1-to-1 ratio. Easy peasy. The way that you always know that your ratio is good, if you look at the palette cam over there, if I spread the paint out, see how it flubbers back in the middle? Shout out to people that have seen the movie Flubber. If you haven't, it's the best World War II movie that has ever been made. I highly recommend it. But, so, you always want to have some of that surface tension and body in the paint. That means that you will get good coverage. And then I'm just going to go back and slap this on top of everything. Now, a lot of my painting relies on the zenithal, a thinner base color application, and then some form of shadow. So whether that, and usually in the form of a wash, so whether that is a hue shadow, so a color being added, usually that is some kind of deeper red. In this instance, I already know we're going to use purple, most likely, because we're going to be painting with red, brown, and gold. So that's an easy option that works every time. And beyond that, it's a matter of just going back and cleaning everything up and working on top with thin layers that will be nice to you. Oh, look, we missed the back there. So I'm looking on my desk to see if I have anything that's kind of in that in-between stage. Oh, I do. So you can see what I mean when I mean picking out, like, it's so funny, I have hair that's like stuck on the... It's inevitable. Whenever I turn on my airbrush booth, like, it just starts vacuuming all of my... I have 2 cats and a dog, and it is impossible to avoid. Guess I'll throw some color under here. No one's gonna look at this miniature ever again anyway, so at least, well, at least when I'm done with it. But, you know, we'll pretend that someone's gonna look underneath this and go, you copped out, man. But, so, a good example of what I'm talking about as those things begin to dry. So this is all underpainting for a project that I'm working on, and there are some good examples. Let's go a little seasick here for a second. So everything has these crazy tonal colors and then a wash on top, right? But the idea is that you build your tones back up on top. So all of these different plants, you can see this one has like the nice red shadow tone. These are actually rendered out completely, so we've added the color back on top. So that's kind of, you know, the idea of what I do when I paint. Everything in front of me is completed paint jobs, kind of. At least not a good example of like throwing a colored wash on top of everything. So that should give you an idea sort of how, you know, you move quickly, throw a wash on top, and then you start sketching or building your layers back up in rapid succession. So I'm gonna zoom in. We do this all the time. We go hyper seasick mode. So we zoom in, we go really zoomed in, and then now we're back to like normal. So, all right. We have these two ready to rock and roll. Let's go ahead and do the top tassels. And then we can, now I'm just noticing too, we do have a bit of shirt underneath, but not a big deal. We can do it really quick. I will say that this mini printed out really well. I don't know how long it took me. I use a Saturn, and this is Soraya Fast Gray. I tend to overexpose a little bit just because you know how it goes. If you're printing a lot of different pre-supported stuff from different people, you never know whose is better than others. And I will say, Broken Anvil stuff pretty much has always been good for me. So there you are. But I overexposed my stuff slightly. But I print in the garage, and we had like a huge snowstorm. I mean, a ton of people had a huge snowstorm recently, but I do it in a grow tent with a space heater. So we just have a brown and a dark red. So I use Reaper paints, so this is intense brown, and then spattered crimson. Spattered crimson, unfortunately, is a canceled color. They were like, you're canceled. And they never made it again. But no, so when I was working with Reaper, it was funny because like the first 8 months or so, I ended up doing, you know, we're doing the show and everything, and I'm getting paint, and that's kind of when I honed in my paints that I use. And that, you know, not that any, like, I'm somebody that you really don't have to have the same paints that I do in order to like learn something that I'm doing. It's just about color and consistency. But I wanted to hone it in since I do Patreon stuff too, right? Makes it easy if someone's like, I want the exact paints that you use. Well, you know, I can make that happen if I just have a limited palette. So that's what I was doing. And it was funny because as soon as I figured out what my palette was going to be, an email comes through, Reaper, and they're like, hey, so when you're picking paints, don't pick like this entire list, right? And I'm like, great, that includes, you know, like 8 of the colors that I just got a ton of for like the next few years of my painting. So that was pretty funny. But so if you're somebody that like wants to go buy that color, it's just a dark red. It's nothing fancy. Reaper is interesting just because they do have some paints that are very unique, like phthalo green, phthalo blue. They have a rose gold that's really weird. They have some others like Succubus Kiss, Red Brick, which is actually a purple. You know, the naming conventions are weird. You know, they don't necessarily make sense, but that's pretty typical of all paints. I still wish there was a brand that just had like food names, right? Obviously, you can tell I'm a model of physical physique, so, you know, food's a big deal, but I would love it if it was like, this is, you know, Burger Brown, and you're like, okay, cool. But I will say one brand I like that does a really good job of all of their naming. Is War Colors is really cool because they just have like red number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and each one is like a little bit darker, a little bit brighter. That to me seems very simple. You know what I mean? Like there's no guess here. So I'm just going through now. Eventually, this will be gold, but I guess this is what coppery orange is the official name. And with the metallics that I'm using with Reaper, they're already a pretty good consistency, but currently I have a little bit of water mixed in. A lot of people are afraid to add water to metallics, and you really shouldn't be. Obviously, don't try and like make a wash out of them. So, but it does help. Who's DJM? Is that Dave? Is that you, Dave? Patreon Dave. I do sell kits of all the colors that I have. I don't know how many I have left though. I think maybe like 5 or 6, but when you've been in the game as long as I have, you have to figure out ways to survive, you know what I mean? So getting a bunch of paint and reselling it obviously is something you can do. So I'm just making sure all my brush strokes are nice and even. I always add a little bit of water, right? I've mentioned it before, so that we can have consistency in the surface tension. That helps you prevent tea staining and tearing and gross streaks of brush marks, right? But you kind of just get used to it once you get that consistency down. So that looks pretty good. I don't know if the face is like, you know what, we're gonna do it this way. So we're gonna pretend, oh no, there is a little bit. Okay, so for the sake of speed, we're gonna pretend the entire head is part of the helmet. Even though it looks like there's a mask going on here and non-helmet parts of the head, we're executive painting decision here. And we are helmeting the head. All right, so what color should the wings be? Neon green, aqua, blue. I don't know. We're gonna have the wings be as simple as possible. Wings are a trap. Man, it was funny for I did a bunch of work on the owl release. I forget the name, but all the band minis that were the owl folk, right? And it was such a blast going through. It was funny. I kept making the joke that like all of the sculpts couldn't help but resist to have one arm up somehow, like at a 90-degree angle or a 45-degree angle, making it like a nightmare to do feather work, because instead of being able to paint them all the same direction, you're then stuck with a whole arm now of feathers pointing up. Which, if you're dry brushing or something, it's no big deal. But of course, I was very, simply lining every single feather. So feathers are a trap. Depending on how much detail you start to put into them, I mean, you're kind of stuck with all of them, right? Obviously, airbrushing is nice. Dry brushing is nice. I don't really dry brush that often, but that is something that is definitely helpful in that scenario. Probably what we're going to do is a bunch of tinting and then very, very easy highlights at the end. So that'll be the quickest way for us to do it. That's going to be silver. We'll do the, I feel like this thing needs to be gold, but maybe we make it silver just for fun. I mean, it seems like it should be gold, obviously, but we're not going to do that. We'll do our pommel here. That is wrap. Okay. Now this, let's do the details on the neck plate. there are a lot of now that the world is entering into so much digital sculpting, right? Obviously, you're getting a entire like breadth of people into the sculpting space that are bringing their skills from different industries, right? Which is cool. But even people like Bobby Jackson and guys like that have been sculpting for like 30 years learned digital. So I mean, you're still getting traditional miniature painters or sculptors, right? But it is easy to sort of over-engineer stuff. That's one thing I really like about Broken Anvil, since we're here. A lot of their stuff is really paintable, and it isn't like over-engineered. You're not like thrown 18 billion details that you just know like you're gonna try and ignore somehow. But definitely in a world of a million STLs out there, sculptors definitely are just kind of like, you're like, how many scales do you want on this thing? Do you want all the scales? And then do you want like chains on top of the scales with skulls in the chains on top of the scales? And then like my social security number and my credit card details and a picture of me in the 7th grade on the scales? And you're just like, all right, man, you've gone too far. I'm upset. I'm just trying to sit down and paint and relax. That's what's interesting too, right? Like, back in the day, it's weird to say that at all, but growing up, going to the hobby store, and you would look at miniatures, right? And it'd be like, all right, here are all these basic minis, cool. And they might look intimidating in some way. But typically, like the super intricate minis would always be like, your expensive unit for like Warhammer or whatever, right? Like it always is something meant to be cool. So it'd be like a big boss creature, an expensive unit, something like that, right? And that'd be the mini that you're like, ooh, that's, I'm intimidated by that. And it definitely is being advertised that way. But now, with all the different sculptors out there and creators, it's like every month you can end up getting 30 minis that you're like, oh my God, they look amazing. And then you print them and you're like, what do I do? They look too amazing. We're going back and having a riveting time here doing all of the buttons. Let me know if I need to zoom in, but we're not doing anything revolutionary here. We're just base coating. And then, like I said, we're going to do a gigantic wash party. This angel's going to take a bath. And then as soon as we're done with that, we can start wrapping things up, which I know sounds silly, but you'll be able, if you haven't watched my painting before, it will all suddenly come together. And again, if you have any questions, anything like that, definitely throw them my way. They also made a channel on the Broken Anvil Discord where you can ask questions and stuff like that. So you can always leave them in there if you think of something later. All right, let me see what just got finished. It's like there's packs and accessories. Yeah. Learning how to paint effectively. So one thing I always try and tell people is that, well, there are a few things in general that'll make you faster. One of them is always going to be brush control and the thinning of your paint, which will come into play here once stuff starts drying, or after I wash. But on top of that, some people have like analysis paralysis when it comes to painting. Like they're like, I don't know what color to use here or what color to use next or whatever. Like they end up spending a lot of time sitting and trying to think, right, of what they're supposed to do while they're working on a miniature. And that's totally fine. Like some people enjoy that specific problem. They're like, that I relax by sitting there and figuring out what I want to do. But one thing that speeds you up as a painter, beyond brush control and thinning, right, is having a consistent technique and using the exact same size brush for every single thing that you do. Those two things will always produce predictable results, and the more predictable your results are, the less you have to sit and think about what you're doing, and you literally can just do it. Those things always, hey, what's up, Pete? Those things always are things that people, like, once they kind of start trying to paint the way that I paint, pick up on, and it's like immediate. And they're like, wow, okay, yeah, like now that I'm not trying to figure out X, Y, and Z all the time, and I'm just kind of throwing paint on there. Like, once you can always trust in the process and the way that you're applying the paint, a lot of the timing kind of goes out the window. So all right, we are pretty much, I don't know if I even want to put anything on the wings right now, so we're not going to. All right, so I'm going to grab a clear color here. This is just straight up one pigment plus binder. So we're grabbing purple. And since we're doing gold as well, like purple obviously is going to work really well, but I'm going to probably mix in a little bit of a darker red. Clear pigment always looks like super saturated whenever you're applying it as in a wash in general. I've used it enough that I know it chills out all the time. Like, as soon as you do it, you might have a little freak out moment, like I have made a terrible mistake, but I promise you, it desaturates as it dries. So I'm gonna take a little bit of that. I'm not a squeezer, I'm a cap tapper. I don't know if you've noticed that. I know there's a lot of contention between it. And then of course I'm gonna squeeze after I say I don't do it. Boom. All right, so this is gonna be our wash. Typically whenever I'm doing a wash, I never use any pre-made washes. Insane, I know, but you already have paint, and it, other than needing a consistent color over like a million miniatures, I totally understand it for that. I'm a big fan of army painter washes, but I always mix my own, and it's typically a 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 ratio of paint to water. Let's see if I did it right, and I did. And this is just going to go over everything. And again, like I said, it's going to look much more saturated than it actually is. It's all part of the plan, man. We're looking for a tint and a shadow in the recesses. Because I go so thin on that first layer, if I'm utilizing a zenithal base application with the primer, it allows this wash to be doubly as effective. Wow. And it always works out for you. Typically. Sometimes we oopsie and make grave mistakes, but I don't think we are here yet today. If you end up painting this guy yourself as well and do anything similar, I mean, who cares if you don't follow along, right? You do something else. You can always send it to me. I think that stuff's really cool. I always like seeing people's work. You can drop it in the BAM Discord, of course. If you don't want to do it publicly, you can DM it to me. You can DM it to me on Instagram. Do it on Facebook. I don't care. Wherever you are a denizen, I'm sure it will be fine. Now then, we're going to do a little bit more work on our silvers, but for now, I'm just going to throw it on everything. With metals, you don't necessarily, so like a giant flat metallic surface like this obviously is not the nicest thing. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to grab and pull the wash so that I don't have like really weird results here. But like I said, we're gonna have to go back and do some work on that thing. And then on the base, you know, there's a conspiracy that I never paint bases on streams, which is true. I rarely finish a base ever, but this is sculpted, so I'm just gonna go ahead and throw this wash all over the base, and then we'll pretend to make it nice bluish gray clouds. Hopefully, don't quote me, by the end of this. If there's anything I have faith in you to do on your own, it's finish the base. So but usually what we'll end up doing, typically whenever I do like a start to finish paint job, I'll invest more time on a couple features on whatever it is that we're painting that I feel are like the cool parts, right? So this is going to be armor because that's what you guys wanted. You wanted, you know, ways to make armor look cooler when you're using metallic paints, and probably the blade. Those two things are definitely the attention grabbers on this sculpt. The wings are cool as well, but we're going to end up phoning it in most likely, in terms of like doing anything extra or amazing. But typically stuff like bags, belts, leather shoes. You know, every single miniature wears the same leather boots. If you've been around the block long enough, you know that's true. So things like that aren't necessarily anything that we spend ages on. What's funny is I've painted so many boots and bags and belts in my day that like there's just, it's kind of like painting hands. There's a technique that I do for all of it, and it's literally the exact same no matter what you're doing, or even the same color. It's kind of funny, but they're always so similar that you just kind of do the same thing every time. All right. I'm so glad I picked this extremely small miniature. It's so simple. It's not complex at all. It's not, demanding a bunch of detail. Okay, so we got all that. I'm gonna mix a new batch of this for the wingos. I'm probably gonna put some blue or something in with the wings. And look, you can already see everything's drying for us. Okay, so like I said, I'm gonna grab a little bit of blue. I'm gonna cheat and use clear phthalo blue, which is a phthalo pigment, which is spelled phthalo or PHTH, right? Yeah, PHTH, because words make sense. And it's just an odd pigment. It's very luminous. It bounces light in a really cool way. And so I'm going to mix that in with some of the purple that no longer exists on my palette. I'm catching up on the chat. 80% of the time it works all the time. It's, all of the people that have watched me paint for a long time and the people on my Patreon, they will confirm. Many times I'll go in and I'll just be like, all right, this is what we're doing. Oh, actually, so when I run into trouble is when I end up spending a long time on paint jobs. So I have an example here. Once we throw this on the wings, I can show you of something I repainted probably 8 times. Just literally spent the equivalent of like 3 hours on it over the course of months. And sure enough, like scrapped it over and over. And it was so painful. I hate scrapping anything. I went to college for art, so I have a fine art degree, which does influence my painting and the way that I teach it and everything like that. But whenever we were doing like life drawing classes, if I wasn't like forced to do my focus was in studio art painting. But often when I was painting, I would always have a lot of permanency. So, the paints that I would use were effectively like Sharpies. And I hated to work on anything like in more than one session. So it's kind of funny how fast I am now in a lot of the work I do. And I get in trouble when I work on things a long time. It's like always been the case for me. I just don't like having to edit or revise or do anything like that. But many times I'll work on these long-term projects and then just like make a mistake or a guess and have to scrap the whole thing. So we have this nice kind of bluish tint going on to the wings that we can then easily cheat our way out of at the end, most likely by using a bluish gray. I know there are some people here that in the chat right now that watch me all the time, so they know probably exactly the bluish gray I am referring to. People that watch my streams know a few things about me. I'm extremely predictable with my color choices eventually once you watch enough, because I only have so many I use. And they'll sit there and I'll be like, what should we use here? What's gonna happen next? And they know. All right, so here we have a pretty good starting point. I need this to dry a little bit more. And we can really get down to business. How long have we been live? Good, 49 minutes. That's perfect. Perfect. I was afraid we were going to be at like an hour 20, and I was like, all right, we're going to have to speed it up. But this is great. This is pretty much the 50% mark of the miniature. So in terms of slamming, we're cool. Did I just knock this off? Let's not do that. Hard time starting a project. You can never figure out which colors to use. You know, so one thing I always talk about with people is it's really important to have a visual like reference. And one way to do that is by finding an artist that you like, or if you're somebody that's like, when am I going to sit down and look at an artist that I like, right? What you can do is look at any digital illustration or artwork. And so concept art's a good thing for that, like the Rivenstone concept art or anything for BAM, video games, whatever. And if you're like, you know, I always have a problem figuring out like what color I'm supposed to do leather. Look at objects that are leather, look at like 2 of them that you really like, figure out how you would paint them, and I guarantee you won't ever guess again, right? So for me, and I've done like one-on-one lessons before with people where I show them how to figure out, like looking into and really like analyzing the way that people are utilizing color to paint certain things, and they then are able to always transfer that. So like for me, I never have to sit and think, other than obviously at the beginning, I'm like, do we do gold, do we do silver, right? But when it comes to certain objects, textures, things like that, I just start and I take sort of my reference that I have of colors or shapes, objects, whatever, and then I just apply it to the palette that we're already using, and it works really well. So especially like, you know, a volumetric painting, that works really well. Realistic textures, it works really well. Surfaces, materials, whatever. It's a good way to do it. So yeah, or just look up color scheme and you can do that. So yeah, I mean, I don't typically, I mean, sometimes I do weird colors. I do weird colors. I don't know why I'm saying that. I'm a liar. But sometimes I paint normal, so to speak. So this was a really long-term project that I worked on, and I repainted that purple cloth probably 5 times. Yeah, interestingly enough, I actually have a product that I made called the periodic table of painting. And so for people that are not good with color wheels, right, or color theory, what it is it's laid out just like the periodic table of elements, and you have a ton of colors. Each color is assigned a number, and then there are different equations down at the bottom that tell you how to find an analogous color, a triad color, a square color, right? All the different ways that you would use a color wheel. So if you are on, you know, this, if you're painting currently, if you're like, I know the skin is going to be green, so it looks good with it, you start at that green and you go, I need 2 other colors to work with. And it'll tell you, you know, add 17, you go down 17, and you go up 17, and those are 2 color choices for you that work in color theory. So I worked on that a long time ago, and I used to sell it at conventions before the pandemic, but I know people loved it because it's something that you can like put on your wall. I don't sell physical copies anymore, but I do sell a PDF that's like huge if you want to print it like large format. But that always has helped a lot of people as well. All right, so this is looking good. So why don't we go in? Yeah, wait, we're gonna do this. Sorry, seasick. Ooh-hoo-hoo. This thing's so big. Okay, hold on. This is bigger than I would normally. Let me back the camera out. Jeez. Jeez, boy. What's that mean? What's the clip? He's like, damn, that boy thick. All right, so let's work on our metals. So what I'm going to do, we're going to do a lot of tinting before we do any highlighting on our gold. So I'm going to grab 2 colors. I'm going to need green. Shocker, I know. Weird, right? But I'm going to grab a clear green. So again, this is just a color that has 1 pigment in it. And then I'm grabbing that Succubus Kiss color, which is like a burgundy wine or a bruised purple. Or I'm just trying to think of like generic names that would like make your brain understand the color I'm using. But it's a reddish purple. It's kind of dark. And we're going to mix this into a glaze consistency. Now then, glaze consistency means when you get all of it off of your brush, and it's very similar to a wash consistency, right? But all it means is that it's like dirty paint water coming off the tip of the brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to accentuate and bring out the shadows on these very natural arborinos here. And then, as we get to the side of the body, and kind of down here in the center too, I don't know how dark I'm going to take the contrast, but we're going to go ahead and glaze everything. Now then, volumetrically speaking, so what I mean by that is, based on the overall basic shape of the armor here, his abdomen is a cylinder, okay? So it's a tubular object, and a really easy way, it was funny in the Discord, right? I was kind of saying, like, I don't know if we're going to do true metal or non-metallic metal, right? It's all the same to me, doesn't really make a difference. And what I mean by that is, if you are doing true metallic metal, which is a painter's way of saying we're doing a metallic paint and we are shading it to look very realistic, okay? If you're doing that, you're still looking at the volumes or the shape of the object that you're painting, and that's the exact same thing that you do whenever you do non-metallic metal. But one good way that you can pick up references on that and learn what the shapes look like when light hits them is go on Google or whatever your search engine is of choice if you're an Ask Jeeves kind of person, and you just type in digital illustration basic shapes, right? Or basic lighting on shapes, geometric shapes, things like that, and you will find reference images of literally every basic volume. You can also do digital illustration, volumetric lighting, and the exact same thing pops up. And whatever you find is going to be a very appropriate reference that you can always use no matter what in all of your miniature painting. But so you can see what we've done here is we've started to accentuate all of the work that was already done there for us by the wash that we applied. And then instead of using black, one thing I learned in art school was that you're not allowed to use black whenever you're painting until typically the very end. Another little cheat that I do is I don't own a pitch black paint. The only pitch black that I own, like a pure black, is primer. But I use an off black that is actually like just a super dark gray. And that way I'm like never really crushing out any of my composition. But using a color, a contrasting color, complementary color, always is a better choice than mixing with black, unless you're doing literally like black armor or black hair, something like that. But I always choose to do a color instead because it makes your work so much more dynamic. So there we go, we're just rendering that out even further. Now then, having a good light source, like physically a light source above your head, is a super important cheat. When you're painting, I use these huge 5 bars, PHIVE. You can find them on Blamazon. And I have 2 of them, so it's like a 60-inch LED bar combined above me. And you can see I'm literally using it to help me figure out the volume. So the highlight's going to go down the center facing us, and then we're going to go back and apply our nice shade tint here on the top and middle, rounding it out further. I haven't mentioned yet the context for technique is that he loads the brush with water, then adjusts that amount. Well, I always have a wet brush, so sorry. Let me help you guys because this is important with glazing too. So we're gonna do this real quick. This is something I always do anytime I'm like meeting people for the first time. Okay, hi, nice to meet you. Let me teach you about brushes. So this is a big fat brush full of water. All right, we're body shaming this brush. It's the only time it's appropriate. Look at you, you're so fat. Okay, now if you're ever wanting to know, like, if you want to have a loaded brush to mix in with your paint to have a good ratio, you don't want it to be overloaded, okay, and saturated with paint. You want it to be perfect. So what you do is you take your brush, assuming it's a natural bristles. It works sometimes with synthetics. It depends. If you're using like a nylon brush, it ain't gonna work. But if you're using Taklon, something like that, usually will. And you take it and you go, and you slap that puppy. I'm gonna do it again. Okay. Now, look what happens. It frays. Usually it goes to a point. There we go. So whatever is left is usually a perfect brush for all work. Essentially, if you have thin paint and you have a wet brush, it's not going to flood off of the brush, right? You're going to be able to pull it onto the tip and use it almost like a pencil. Let me see if I can here. Shout out to my primer finger. I know it's so nice. But if you're doing a glazing consistency, right, that's what you're looking for. But what I always do, okay, so I have my brush straight up out of the pot, and then I roll it, and you can see now I'm back to that same shape and consistency with water. So same idea as taking your brush and tapping it against your finger to get it to a point, except I just roll it on my finger. But that's a good way if you aren't like used to doing that. There you go, that's a good point. Now the brush is being nice. But that's a good way to know, right, that you're at a good consistency with paint if you're going to be glazing, doing anything like that. It's just a nice and easy cheat. So hopefully that's helpful. But yeah, I'm glad you reminded me in the chat there. I always forget, like, yeah, the amount of water in your brush at all times is also very important whenever you're doing that. OSD, my OSD, yeah, it's always going to be there. You can't turn it off. You can't turn it off. A $1,000 camera, and you can't turn it off. Which is funny, you used to be able to with the previous model of this camera that I had. But this one, I mean, you could like break the firmware, but I haven't looked into doing that, so. My other camera was fine, except the HDMI port out of it went bad, which obviously is not a good thing. So I completely had to get a new camera. I sold the other camera to somebody that used it as a normal camera because it was perfectly okay. But I could no longer reliably use it for streaming. It would like completely freak out on us all the time. And since I paint on camera for people like nearly every day, obviously that can turn into an issue. So Vox, the consistency is essentially the same as a wash, but what I was explaining previously was that it's just you need to roll it off almost all the way on the brush whenever you're pulling it. So one thing I'm doing here is I take my brush, if you look at the palette cam, and I pull and drag and twirl my brush. I twist it, and that way the brush isn't ever going to be loaded with a lot of the glaze, and instead it's just like the perfect amount for me to use. I can use it to tint everything, which is what I'm doing now. Because yeah, if you're having problems with the consistency, like, wow, this is so runny, or whatever, well, it could be that it's too runny. You know, I'm not going to argue there. But what it could be is that you're just pulling too much onto your brush. And if that's the case, it's not going to be nice to you. And, you know, you're going to have a hard time. Or not really a hard time, but it's just not the result you want, right? You want predictability when you're painting, and that way, you know, you're having more fun. When you're getting results that you didn't expect, you know, usually not going to be having as much fun painting. So that's when people get frustrated. So I'm just going through, layering this in. It's so exciting, I know. Of course, I had to choose Big Daddy and all the gold armor, but we're going to keep doing this color. Luckily, we're almost done with our golds. And then I'm going to introduce some green. Now, why green? Science, I suppose. I don't know the best way to put it, but it's really just color theory. We're using a lot of warm tones to offset it. We need something cool. Now, there is such thing as a warm green, and there is such thing as a cool green. We're going to be going with a cool green to offset all these nice reddish hues that we've been introducing. Now, anytime you're using complementary colors on top of each other, it's kind of like a lighting trick. If you were ever a theater person and you did the lighting, like the, what's the term? The shades, like the gel shades you would put over the big lights. I don't even think that's the right word. Either way, it's been a long time since 7th grade. those start to turn black, right? The more you layer on top. That's exactly what happens whenever you use complementary colors on top of each other. So if I wanted a really deep shadow, I could layer, you know, a blue on top of a red and it would look black, right? And that way you get away with not using black paint. So, neat little trick. Okay, this arm collected so much wash, so I'm trying to be cool about it. Keep it cool, man. Now remember, we haven't done any highlighting or like reapplication of our base color either of the gold. That's something that we will do. A lot of people that have trouble making like their metallic paint look, you know, whatever, more dynamic, we'll say, is they're like, well, yeah, I mean, I keep trying to layer up, right? Like I'm mixing a brighter gold, or I'm mixing this, mixing that, and it just does not look good, and I'm not happy with it. Well, I hear that, and I say, okay, what about this trick, right? Hold on, we're gonna reboom and zoom here. So my little trick is, why are you layering up multiple colors when you should be shading down from your original color, right? So that's what we're doing here, and we're gonna essentially keep working on this until we're really happy with all of our contrast, the different details that are going on, and then that way we don't really have to layer anything back up on top. We can just reapply our initial color and it'll look really rad. TM. You would hope, at least, right? Sometimes mistakes happen, but based on what I'm seeing here today, I think we're gonna have a decently successful, cool looking mini. The consistency of this glaze also allows me to pretty much use my brush like a pencil, so that's how I'm able to do all of the lining work super quick. I'm not really concerned that like the brush is going to go somewhere I don't want it to, and I'm able to just sketch in the edges that I want very reliably and very quickly. That again has to do mostly with the fact that I use the same size brush for everything, so I can pick this thing out in a crowd, you know what I mean? I know exactly what the brush is going to do. Typically, of course, all the time. Alright, so I'm pretty happy here with what we've got, so we can introduce some greens a little bit. Now the green glaze here, extremely thin. We're talking dirty paint water, like a whisper of a fart, okay? That's a technical term, meaning barely anything. And this is gonna go in between where our midtones live. That's a lot of words, right? So what that means is not in the brightest highlight, but next to where those highlights live is where I'm gonna go and glaze in some of this green. It's not gonna be obvious right now. It might be a little obvious. You can kind of start to see it. But essentially it's gonna touch right next to where our previous color tapers off. And I don't want to go too far too fast. That's why this first application, this is like the test run, right? It's kind of like when you say it when you were in 7th grade, you would like say a cuss word at the lunch table, and you're like, did anybody hear it? Did I get in trouble? We're just, you know, you want to make sure everything's cool. Obviously, you throw a bunch of green on top of something that's too thick, and suddenly it's like, why did you just put a bunch of green on there? So we're just being smart about it, but it's going right next to those edges. And as soon as I'm happy with that and it dries, we'll do another coat. So I can kind of tell where it was already, so that's good. Throw some right here. Again, super thin. Now this arm is a problem just because of how the plating is positioned, so it's not really going to show up as much there. Alright, second pass here. It's going to be much more obvious. Okay. Hey, what's up, man? Minnie's looking awesome. Well, we're hoping. I have plenty of opportunity left to mess it up, so. Glad to see you make it live. Okay, so I need to put a little bit more here. These heads are really giving me like PTSD flashbacks of when I had to paint the lion shoulders on that paladin bust that I showed you guys earlier. That was something I completely had to redo. Feel like you learned a lot. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I am lucky in that I seem to have the ability to help people learn things about painting, and so I can squeeze out a very meager living painting. What do you do for a living? I paint toys. No, I usually tell people I work in the board game industry, and that like gets it in the door. So their brain starts going, oh, very intriguing. All right. Here we are. Cool beans, all that jazz. So now I'm going to take a... Do I do that now? No. All right, we're going to take the original copper. That was live brain editing you just heard. So we're taking the original color here. And again, I'm doing the deal with the wet brush. And, like I said before... Oh, I did snap that. See, I glued that down there in that little pivot, and I knew when I dropped it, something snapped on me. All right. So this isn't necessarily thinned. I refurbish broken toys. I mean, that can work. A little Toy Story-ish. But so earlier when I was like, don't be afraid of thinned paint or thin metallics, this is what I was talking about. So I'm going to start going back. Where's my focal length? There we go. This is going to start looking so good and shiny. I'm applying this to where all of our nice, bright, shiny highlights would live. Now, the only question for me that I'm determining is like, do I go back and highlight kind of this band in between? And the only reason I'm having that dilemma is just because it's kind of like a determining factor of the all-over shininess of the armor, because it's a bending shape towards the viewer, I guess, would be the idea there. But I think we'll just keep it cool and do it like this. Again, very thin metallic paint. Almost like a glaze, as it were, but you can see now we're getting that awesome reflection. You can see the green in there, but it's not like crazy, I guess. I don't know, maybe. Go on this side. There we go, look at that. The best part about a thin metallic application too is that typically all you're going to be picking up is the actual metal flake. And so as that mini moves around, it's going to be super shiny. Now if you're someone like me, okay, I want all of you to be like me. Actually, no, I don't. You don't want to be like me. But I, for whatever reason, really like ultra matte minis, so I end up using the AK Ultra Matte. I usually have it in front of me. I use this stuff as my varnish. Look, see how I take care of my things? There's airbrush spray on it. But I use that. That will kill your shininess quite a bit. So, you know, typically if I have like super shiny reflections on stuff I've been working on, like we have right now, it disappears. It goes bye-bye. It visits its family in another state, right? You just don't see it ever again. Not that it completely goes away, but I do lose the ultra shine. But, you know, if I don't varnish something, it will stay looking nice and bright. The only reason I just use that varnish, though, is I really don't do a lot of true metallic metal painting. I do a lot of non-metallic, and a lot of glazing colors will end up, you'll end up losing, or, well, they're kind of shiny, I'll put it that way. And so you lose the depth of what you're looking at. So sometimes mid-paint job, I have to like stop what I'm doing and apply a little clear coat of it because I just literally can't see. Like I'm trying to do very detailed work in shadows or something, and just disappears on me. Not a problem for the majority of people, obviously, but happens to me in different situations, and I just can't hang with it. Drives me crazy. Typically purples, reds, sometimes blues, usually like darker blues. It's more common. Green or blue greens, not green blues, but blue greens, you'll find it a lot. And I want this reapplication, by the way, to blend into wherever the greens were kind of tapering off. So you can see I'm applying it back to where that green was, and then in the shadow, you can still see the green a little bit, and then it blings out all crazy. Tops of these little guys. And we are going to apply one more kind of gold metallic. It's actually a brass, I think. But that's going to add that final really bright jump of color. So again, right, kind of the keys for true metallic metal. Ooh, technique words, right? You always want to pay attention to the volumes of the shapes that you're painting. Is it a cone? Is it a square? Is it a sphere? Right? The basic shape dictates a lot of what you're going to be doing. Then, beyond that, you are going back and adding in additional shadow. So whether you're glazing, if you are more of a washing person, right? You just want to make sure you're doing something to render back in those shadows. The wash that we applied would have been fine, right, if I had done it again in a darker color, and then you could go back and dry brush, right? Like a lot of my techniques you can get similar results in an easier way. So if you're someone that is not really to a point in your painting journey yet where you're like, I'm thin and stuff, right? You know, if you're newer, usually people will be like, dry brushing, wow, and then they kind of live in dry brushing land for a little bit, and then they're like, I've learned what a wash is, and you know, I mean, it's very natural, and you just hang out with the techniques that you've learned for a while. So if you're not really at a point to where, you know, you have control over thin paint, stuff like that, totally cool, right? All the different steps can kind of just be interjected with a dry brush or a heavier wash and kind of a reapplication of paint. But I definitely like what I'm seeing here. Everything else on the mini, really simple. I mean, we have the sword to worry about, his nice little doodad in his hand, and then the red, the wings, all that stuff, definitely less work than anything else we've been doing, so. The back here, not as concerned, because his head would be casting more of a shadow. Whether or not that's actually true doesn't matter. You can't tell me any different. Okay, that's where we're at. All right. You get bright shiny armor on the front. All right, don't ask for too much. Back, more of a shadow. Okay. Cool. Let me grab that bronzy color. Here it is. Sorry, brass. I lied. So this is a very light, what I would consider gold. Look, you can see I take care of my things. So you can see the dry paint there on the top. Same idea. Now, one of the reasons why I like to use a little bit of green and golds, especially when you're doing with words, especially when you're using metallic paints. This brass has a little bit of green mixed in it. You won't really be able to tell at all, but you're going to be using it to way more highlight. Let me do our little zoom in here. Look at that. Nice armor, huh? Going on the tops of the abs, right down the middle. But thanks for hanging out with us today. I know we didn't have a lot of time to kind of get the word out, but, you know, we were just so excited to get the engine started, get the ball rolling, running downhill, blindfolded face first, that we were like, let's just do it today. So, if you were here, make sure you drop a I was here in the chat. Say hi, YouTube. All of those things. Because you made it. Patreon Dave, I love the renaming. Yeah, I mean, very rarely, I know. So Dave can tell you, he's been a patron of mine for quite some time. And whenever we do metallic paint, it's usually like, you know, a slap and a wash, and then we pay more attention to something else. But very rarely is the metallic paint like a feature and not a bug. You know what I mean? So obviously on this paint job, it is important. Go back and do more of the details here. Top edges. Yeah, I appreciate you all hanging out. Big thanks, of course, to the Bamley. See, we're starting things here. The Bamley Broken Anvil. For making it happen. We didn't know if we'd make it, but we made it. Now you can't really see that color on the edge, so who cares? But I'll do it right here. More noticeable. little stippling down the center line. So again, if you are just now joining, we're working on one of the awesome angels from the January release. The February stuff is on the way. I know last night it wasn't ready all the way, so. But for the remainder of this month, as soon as they're out, that's what we're going to be working on. I've already picked out which three, so I will definitely share those. I'll let them know so they can let all of you know through their socials, but I'll also tell the Discord channel, so if you haven't joined the BAM Discord, check that out, because there's a place in there for us to talk about the streamy. So definitely get in on that, and I'll make sure you all know. So that way, if you want, you can print the mini. And guess what? you can try and paint along with me, or you can just have it ready for later. Do your thing on your own time. That's what a lot of people do. Even with my Patreon and all the lessons that I do, very rarely, right, can people speed along. They usually show up, say hey, hang out, and then paint at their own pace later, so nothing wrong with that. I'll do a brighter reflection just like right here, and then I think we're going to be done. At least a good enough stamp on that part of the armor. All right, cool. All right, zooming in. Real close, real ugly. Ultra zoom in and zooming out. Look at that. See, it's camera magic. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that. I think that looks fun. So now we have some silver. So like I said, I'm gonna grab a kind of reddish brown, and here it is. So this is a rust brown. It doesn't really look like rust necessarily. It's pretty dark, but you know, names of paint and things. Typically, you know, you'd think of like rust like that or something. But I'm gonna use this as a little bit of a glaze on our silver stuff just to introduce a separate color. That's too thin. So we're gonna try it again. There we go. I'll run it right in here in the little rivets on the side. Okay. Would this be a chakram? Would that be the term we're looking for? In fantasy weapon land, I'm thinking that's what we would go for there. So this guy is Naruto running his way through Heaven's Gates, right? Is that what we're supposed to believe? Boom. Let's do it back. Okay, so this is going to be brighter, so that means this is going to be pretty dark. An easy rule of thumb for blades is that the shadows invert on themselves. So wherever you're gonna have like your bright edge, which for me is gonna be at the top right here, this next side is gonna be darker, and then that means it'll be bright on the bottom where my glue broke, and then it'll be dark down there. So I'm glazing this color first. We're obviously gonna have to take this blade down a lot darker in general, but I just want the color there. Same concept as like, you know, us going back through and doing the succubus kiss and then doing the green and everything. I just kind of want to lay our foundation out on what we're doing there. Guess what? The back to blade doesn't exist. That's how we do it. Actually, I think I had a piece of something stuck to my FEP because I had a hole right there, which it wasn't under the raft. So there's nothing on my FEP. Actually, I don't know how that happened, because that wouldn't happen then, right? Because why'd the raft print just fine? So maybe it had a floater. I don't know. Either way, what I'm trying to say is it's good that the sword is held where it is, because yeah, I literally like was removing this from the supports and I'm like, why is there a hole? But the raft was totally fine. 3D printing, dude. Makes no sense. All right. Must have been a floater. That's what I'm guessing. Floater in some way. Alrighty, so we've got that. We're starting to get kind of a cool reflection there. What printer do I use? I use Saturn's. Big ol' El Goozy Saturn. So I need, let's grab a very dark brown. Now let's see how many minutes it takes for me to find it. Took me under a minute. It's a miracle. How are we looking? We're looking good. An hour and 20 minutes. Okay. And then I'm gonna grab my off black here. Noir black. Technically is what it's called. It's just a very, very dark gray. So I'm taking this brown, some of that noir black. I can even grab some of the rust brown too, just for fun. Say we did it. Look, it's not even on camera. There we go. Looking for that same glaze consistency. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm actually gonna turn this boyo in the directions I want my shadow to go. It's always important to remember to pull the direction you want the gradient to happen. And by that I mean pull your glaze, right, to get the correct shadow. The brush should always go in the direction you want it to taper. So in this instance, right, I want it to go up in that corner. I don't necessarily know if this was too thick or not. It definitely looks thicker than I need it to be, so if that's the case, whoops, but we'll adjust. We will adjust accordingly. So I've got a thinner mix of it here. I'm just gonna taper into it, pretend like I didn't make a mistake. Okay. Up there I don't really care too much. That's fine as well. The bangles are about as dark as they're gonna be. Alright, then I've got a lot more of the black. And just tapering it in. Usually I just wipe it on my thumb and then take the wet brush to taper the shadow darker. That's why my brush, or my thumb, always looks really cool. I have been asked at a gas station before. I forgot what we were painting. I think we were doing what was it? Oh, it was like a big robot guy thing. And it was purple. So I had a bunch of purple paint on my thumb. And later that day, I'm grabbing that middle color that had more of the rust brown and the intense brown mixed together. And I went to a gas station. And I remember the person working there was like, "Did it hurt?" And I just kind of look at him blankly like, "What?" And they're like, "Your thumb, it's broken, right?" No. Sorry to alarm you. Not really what happened there. All right, I'm gonna let that dry, and then I think we can start to go back and apply some stuff. Did it hurt when you fell from heaven? That's not what they said. Sorry, ban me from the chat. I can't be allowed anymore. I kind of want to do one more pass. Do one more here, real thin, pink thin. May have been too much there, but we'll see. All right. So now we get that metal. Just like we did, even though we're not using, I don't think we're going to use two different metals to highlight, but we're going to use the same one. This is skeleton key. It's a very weird metal. It's bluish greeny. So, not watery, but definitely thin. We're going to go back on the sword and begin our cleanup work. Do some scratchies. Is the gold color? Yeah, so it was dragon copper and clockwork brass were the two that we used. Oh, it's interesting to see that the two, they're not even. Well. You learn something new, don't you? So hopefully you can see what's going on here with the blade. Where I did those little cuts up top, I'm going to go back to the dark color here. You can do all the scratches in the world you want, but you have to remember, you got to go back. Right above them, do a little darkness. Otherwise, what is it reflecting off of? Does that make sense? I think that blade looks pretty rad. It's radical. Which again, like I said, you know, when you're worrying more about volumetric stuff like this or true metallic metal, it's literally so similar to non-metallic metal because you're doing essentially the exact same amount of work in the shadows and everything like that to make things stand out. The only difference here, instead of a metallic paint, we would be using a gray and then popping it up to like a white, and that would get us, you know, the result that we're looking for pretty much. Actually got some paint on the back of that. It's okay. No harm, no foul. We'll clean it up. All right, let's do a little chest area here. Teacher gave him a star for being so good at school today. That's what he's holding up. He's like, look what I got. It was good. All right. Wow. Wow, an hour and a half and we painted armor. We're killing it. Killing it on time here. All right, we're fine. Keeping it darker on the back because, you know, shadows and such. All right, let's do this red, shall we? Grab a new palette sheet. It's time. This one's full. She's full, Jim. I use these nice pre-cut. They're for hamburgers. 5x5. So they're not that big, but I literally bought 1,000 of them, and I'm probably down to like 500. And I bought them at the beginning of the pandemic, so it tells you how long they last in terms of painting. Okay. Let's grab. I'm actually going to grab the rust brown that we had, and then the dark red that we use, and then a regular, actually, I'm going to do a brighter red. Okay. Start off here. The dark red, which was spattered crimson, for those that want to know. We're going to get that rust brown. Now, one thing about reds a lot of the time is that they end up going like pink or pastel when you're highlighting them. I like to do it a little bit differently. I'll highlight up to either a brown or a skin tone, and then glaze a red on top at the end to tint everything. You can also go like a marigold yellow or like a sunflower yellow, something like that, but it keeps it from going too like orange, and then that way you just get a very brilliant red at the end of the ordeal. So going back on top of where we did our heavy wash, using the slight highlights that the Zenithal left me as indicators of where to go. Nothing crazy. This stage is more just like re-base coating on top of the shading that we implemented, right, with that wash. Theo, rhetorically. Paint the tail. Okay. All right, that was good. So I'm gonna mix in some of that rust brown into this color here. Start giving us a little bit more body. And I don't care if this is kind of like a brighter jump in color necessarily. If the end goal is glazing on top, then harsher transitions will chill out. Brush strokes will be tapered or filtered more so and obscured. It's always a good thing to remember if you're painting stuff and you're like, oh, I gotta glaze this. You know, don't spend a lot of time doing really smooth blends because that glaze is gonna do it for you. Assuming it's the right consistency. But if it's not, guess what? It's a glaze, so go back again until you hit it. Because that's how it works, it's that simple. Easy peasy. You can see we're just layering it up. There's a crazy noise out there. What am I hearing? What is this music? It's supposed to be on the lo-fi channel. You know, royalty-free music, what can you do? On my streams, I use a separate service, but I only can, you know, like, get away with it on one channel at a time. So we're in mysterious streaming safe music land right now. I also can't like pick the songs. I think that's interesting. I was messing around with it before the stream today and I was like, huh, you can't, unless you pay, of course, but I mean, I already pay like 17 bucks a month for my other service, so. I always find painting cloth to be easy, but nice and predictable. Rarely are you like stumped as to what's going on, you know? Usually. Sometimes, like depending on the sculptor, some sculptors like to do like flowy cloth, which is what we got going on today. Big fan of flowy cloth. Other sculptors like to do very sharp cloth, very angular. And sometimes that can get tricky. But, all right, so now we are just straight up doing the rust brown color, which we've used on a lot of the miniature already. But it's not really gonna look any kind of which way, even though we've already used it. Again, we're going to glaze red. As our end result. Thank you, Daniel. Again, we are always going to be aiming for Fridays at 4 p.m. CST. If that time doesn't work for you, I already know they're planning on, the video on demand, the VOD, will be available afterwards. But then they're also probably re-uploading them to YouTube, so don't worry about it too much. You will be able to find it. You can't watch live. Now, if you're asking questions later on like a YouTube re-upload, I probably won't see that unless I like randomly go check it out later, right? So again, if you join the Discord, there's a channel for the streams. I don't know if someone had linked the Discord previously in the chat, but I think on the main Broken Anvil website. Bright red. See, what's crazy is this color technically isn't red. Remember, well, I mean, it's red. But remember, we're using the rust brown color. That's what this color is right now. So really what it is, it's a perception change. Because of the colors that are around it, it makes it look like a bright red, but it's definitely brown. Like, it's very much just a reddish brown that we've been doing this whole time. Now, once we glaze on top, we're going to get into red territory, which is going to be immediate, and then we're pretty much done with that step. But I like what we have so far. I mean, it looks very fun, very cool, man. Okay. Pull the sleevers up. Let's get this red. Very thin for the glaze. Even surface tension all over, so I'm moving my brush to make sure nothing is pooling, catching, anything like that. We want this to be a nice tint all over the mini. And this should give us our no questions asked, ready red red. If I had highlighted it up even further to, let's say, like a yellowy, so if I had mixed a yellow in with that rust brown, so it'd be like a very light tan or whatever, it would appear more orange and even brighter. It would still be a very brilliant red, but you could still get differentiating color on there. There we go. Okay. Now very quickly, I'm going to grab just a basic skin tone color here. Tanned skin. Guess what? It's not very tan, but, you know. We're going to end up using this color for a few different things along the way, finishing this mini up, but we have some wrap on the blade, and we got a hand. So the hand, I'm going to base coat completely. Sorry, let me bring her into focus here. Very quickly in texturing some of the wrap with the same color as well. Easy enough. We got the Chakram hand. We got little foots. Hey, little foots. You go barefoot in heaven. You go to war barefoot. Wait. Don't look at the back of that sword. Yo, 911 alert. Hold on. Let me grab some paint. I think it's literally just straight up primer. We're doing good. Hey, you know what I said. No one's ever gonna look at that. If you're gonna count points off of my grade today, just 5 points for that. Okay, that's it. Just 5. All right. Okay. It's all right. Okay. Not a big deal. Look, like I said, we're doing a pretty much complete paint job. You know, good enough to put on the fridge with a magnet, you know? I like how I didn't do a silver on the back of that either. Alright, that's cool. We got some touch-ups to do. Okay. I don't have any silver. Okay, cool. I like that. I love, you know, having what I need. There we are. All the armor and bare feet. I know, I'm sorry. Look, I know you guys paid so much to be here, right? I don't want to waste your time and money, okay? Alright. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rust brown. Crazy, right? I'm going to wash it onto the hand. We're going to wash it onto the other hand. On the other hand, we're gonna put the same thing. You didn't even know the feet were there? Yeah. Ultra hidden. Well, yeah, when I was looking at how the miniature was supported and I was getting ready to like break it out of its cage, right? I was like, huh, there's like a thing right in the center of the base that connects to it all. I wonder what that is. And then I realized they have these little feet. Well, but we're just gonna very quickly handle that. So then I'm gonna add a lot of black, make a very dirty brown wash, and I'm just going to wash that over the wrap in here. Take care of that. Yeah, that's what we were doing. We did a lot of washes, and then now we're able to highlight. Okay, so while we're waiting on that to do its thing, I'm going to grab a lighter brown, and we can begin our leather work here. Very exciting. What, bare feet? I mean, it kind of seems, you know, angel-y, right? Like, why would an angel need shoes if you fly all the time and live in clouds, I guess? That would be my immediate thought. And I'm pretty much just going to go for the edges of the tassels. I'm lacking on my armor terms here for these. Then why would he need armor? Because he's going to war, dude. You're asking too many questions. Demons are afraid of feet. There's the answer. Okay, we figured it out. Demons, unless they're a foot demon, then they're on OnlyFans. But clearly, there is a gentleman's agreement between good and evil that they just don't go for the feet. Everybody needs their feet, you know? What's funny too is I'm friends with a lot of sculptors, and mystery solved. Yeah, so I'm friends with a lot of different sculptors. Work with Reaper, other 3D companies, right? And anytime I work on their work, I'll like make comments like that, right? Where I'm like, I wonder, I wonder what that is. And half the time, the answer is like, I didn't think about it. Like I just thought it would look good, right? Or they're like, oh, because then like it'll be a very specific reference, like a pop culture reference, like something that they saw as a kid, and they're like, yeah, it always, so it always made sense that this was this, and Chester the cheetah would have a chainsaw, like. What's interesting too, some of the really OG sculptors I'm friends with, like Bobby Jackson and Julie Guthrie, people like that worked for Valpartha, and all of those legendary companies, right? I've asked them before too, like, what's interesting for you? It could all be feet. Well, if we're going biblically accurate, it literally could all be feet. I asked them like, what do you find exciting about the miniatures once they're made? And a few of them are like, I like seeing the paint jobs and what people do with them. And then some of the other answers are like, they see so many paint jobs that like, that's cool, but it's not, like they get impressed with really impressive ones, but they just see so many paint jobs of the same thing that it's like, yeah, they would expect kind of the results on some of them. So instead, they like hearing what you end up doing with the miniature, right? So it's like, this was my character for D&D, and here's a little bit of the backstory and whatever, and like that's really intriguing to them, because obviously if they've sculpted a billion things, they start sculpting with painting in mind, but they don't ever really sit there and think like what someone's going to use it for, so that's a perspective I didn't expect. So all right, I mixed in a little bit of the tan skin. I'm going to continue to highlight up here. Yeah, my buddy Bobby Jackson, he's someone that's very interested in, because he's been sculpting for 30 years, He's somebody that really loves hearing the stories of characters that he's sculpted. Which is cool, because whenever he sculpts, he gets like an idea in his head, right? Of whatever he's made. Little world that the mini lives in. So then to hear something completely different makes sense. It's pretty cool. The only miniature I've ever had sculpted is a miniature of my cat. Turned out great. My buddy Mark Norton sculpted that one up. He's worked for Warlord Games. He had his own business for a while where he was doing resin casting. I forget who else he's worked for. He's worked for quite a few people. Oh, Dark Heart? Black Heart Miniatures? There you go. The people that do like the horror monster busts and stuff. Yeah, I had a commissioned drawing of myself and my cat a while back, which, as it turns out, was done by an extremely famous Italian YouTuber with millions of subscribers. I think she has 2 million subscribers. And like, how Squidmar and like a few of those people did videos where they're like, I went on Fiverr and did orders without people knowing it was from me. So she did the same thing with my random Fiverr illustration request. And somebody sent me the video. It's like somebody that follows my Facebook page. It was like a year and a half later, and she like talked about me on the stream. She was like, yeah, he paints miniatures and he wanted a logo with his cat. And I think I paid, it wasn't like $10. It was I mean, I paid, I think, like 65 or 70. But for the quality, I probably would have paid, you know, if she worked 4 hours, it should have been like probably 200, 300. You know, any kind of art or creative work, I'm always looking at that like $25 to $50 range, depending on the person. So, and she is very established, so that would be very expensive work. All right, that is easy enough leather for me, ladies and gents. Oh, I didn't know you had a copy of the Arthur. Let me see where he's at. I don't think I ever finished painting this one, the big one. Let me see. I'm gonna open my. I have 4 display cabinets here. Here's that boy. There you go. Some paint chip off. What is that? Gunk on the tail. But there you go. All right. So what do we got? Let me see. Still need to paint it, yeah. I remember when I started selling prints, I gave a few people like small versions of them in their orders. All right, so I'm grabbing a color called Military Blue, which is just a nice bluish gray. Is he for sale? I think I had him on my website. I don't know if he's still there anymore though. I know I was selling the STL. I really don't know though. Because my website I use, like, I have a store. Well, I think he's on my store, but it's locked for my patrons. I sell bundles and stuff. Like every month I'll pick a different 3D vendor license essentially, and I rotate it out. And so all the content that we do on my Patreon is always like 3D printed stuff. If you want to paint along and you don't have a printer, I sell the prints, right? But so that's kind of a part of my Patreon is getting access to the store, where I also sell like one-on-one lessons and stuff I've painted or whatever. Like I just do all kinds of stuff on there. The periodic table of color, all that good stuff. And so it's behind a password that changes. So I'm pretty sure it was on there at one point. And I had a problem with my lung last year in August. And it was pretty devastating. I had to do like a GoFundMe and all this stuff. And so I stopped with a lot of, like, I used to just run a full-time print shop and had to stop with that. And so like my store changed completely. But things are getting back to normal slowly. I mean, it took like 6 months for me to not be in pain every single breath I take all day long, every day. I mean, it's really good for you. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking this color and hitting it on the outside edge of each wing. We're not doing anything groundbreaking here. Like I said, the wings definitely were not going to be invested in more than just existing, so still look good. We got a nice gradient of light and shadow. And then we might dry brush up? I don't know. We'll see. I'm not good at dry brushing, so there you go. But either way, dry brush or not, I appreciate you guys coming here today. Especially everybody that showed up. I know we announced it like this morning, but ideally I wanted to announce it quite a while, right? But I do appreciate everybody. Moving forward, obviously, we are going to keep on doing this on Fridays, same time, same face. And if there's ever a schedule change or anything like that, I should know ahead of time. Reschedules will happen. Just like if I couldn't do it on a certain Friday, we wouldn't push it back into another week or whatever. I would just do it on a separate day. But all that would be announced out. They would know about it. The BAM team would know. Like, we would just let everybody know. And we will keep it going. The rest of this month, as soon as the new release is ready, I will knock 3 of those out. I've already picked the ones that I want, so as soon as it's out, right, or really whatever, I can announce it tomorrow, I guess, whatever. But I'll let you guys know, right, what we're going to work on. So as soon as it's ready, you can print those if you want to have them ready. And we will continue on from there. So, oh, and look, see, I'm so good at distracting you all that I'm literally hiding the fact that we didn't do the base. Do I have to do the base? Do I have to follow through? We'll pretend a little bit on the base here. I'll grab that cool phthalo blue, and I'm just gonna do like a little glaze or whatever. But see, I timed it right at the end of my 2 hours. I'm like, oh, we don't have enough time for the base. It was on purpose. Devious. But I appreciate it. Hope you had fun. Remember, if you have any questions later, whatever, hop in that Discord. Holler at me. If Discord's not your thing, I get it. It's okay. You can find me on Facebook, Josh Davis Miniatures. You can find me on Instagram, Josh Davis Miniatures, right? You can find me on Twitch, on YouTube. It's all the same name. If you are ever looking for more tutorials, painting lessons, one-on-one lessons, anything like that, please definitely check out my Patreon as well. Starts at $5 a month. You get 5 videos for $5 a month, one of them being a class, the other one's just being fun little painting videos that we do each Monday. If you would like to know kind of what you're getting into, it's very similar to this, right? So here's a BAM Mini we painted up for Patreon. It had a lot of fun. Same time frame, they're always within 2 hours or so. Here's another BAM Mini, this Grimmy we painted up. This last month's work that we were doing, we did little mini busts. So these were all part of the Patreon as well. You can check these out here. Had a lot of fun working on these guys. These were all within that 2 hour line. Really fun stuff. So definitely check it out. There's the Scholar tier at $5 where you get one sort of normal basic class that focuses on like one technique or topic. There's the Scholar tier that then jumps to $10 a month where you get a secondary, more in-depth or advanced class. And then there's the Atelier tier where we do a long-term project as well. And that's an additional weekly video. So you get like, 2 videos a week, but you end up getting like 10 or 12. This was one of those $20 tier projects that we worked on for a long time. So definitely like competition level painting. Oh, here was another one. I always just have these things around me. We had fun working on this guy too for quite some time. So definitely check it out. Patreon.com/Josh Davis Miniatures. And we will see you again with the new BAM release for February, hopefully, next Friday as well. So thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it. The BAMly. Is that what we're going with? The BAMly? But thanks. Have an awesome weekend, guys. Adios.